Hi, today we design a temple which, due to a huge cataclysm, ended up underwater. As you can see, the terrain is designed procedurally, meaning that we can change the distribution of stones, stalagmites and mosses very easily by just clicking on a side panel. This is where 3D graphics and procedurality really helps the modeler, because with just a few clicks you can check many combinations of terrains and choose the one that you prefer. This model is meant to guide us in the building process of a real diorama. For this reason, I will pay special attention to materials and dimensions. This model is part of a larger diorama, so stay tuned for future videos. But now, let's start! Let's start with a temple. The design I have in mind is something like Luxor temple, but way smaller. Select our cube. First of all, edit mode, select the bottom face, Shift S, cursor to selected, then origin to 3D cursor and 0. Let's reduce the size, it's way too big, to 5 centimeters, and zoom in. Edit mode, Ctrl R, add some loop cuts, vertical and again horizontal. Select this loop cut with Alt and with Shift this, and with S on the Y we get them closer to the door. Let's select this, move it up, and this, move it down. Now we go to front view, orthographic, select everything and deselect just the door and extrude the rest. Now we deselect also the frame and extrude the rest. Select the back and move them closer. The door. Now we select the sides, 1, 2, 3, and extrude along normals using the individual origin, so like that. Now again extrude, and in order to get a pyramid-like shape, I select all these faces and X, limited dissolve, and now I can scale. Okay. Finally, it's not very regular, so I select these two edges, 1 and 2, and move them apart, like that. And we add a pathway, sort of a square, Shift A plane, let's make it 10, and move it in front, maybe even less, like that. Extrude by, let's make it 0.4, inset, then extrude again, and inset again, and extrude again. Now we subdivide this square, let's make it 5, select these ones, inset, extrude, inset, and extrude, and we are pretty much done. Now we can add a base, so Shift A, mesh UV sphere, let's make it 25 centimeters, move it down, orthographic view, go to X-ray mode, and that's our basic shape. Now it's time to create some roughness. Okay, I've imported some objects, some stalagmites, stones and moss, and now we have to scatter them across the ground. So let's select the base and go to geometry nodes, and let's create a new node, scatter. We need to distribute the points on faces, and for each point we're gonna instance an object. So Shift A, distribute points on faces. Actually, we will create a separate branch for this geometry. So join geometry and like that. I prefer to use Poisson disk because we can define a distance between objects in order to avoid overlapping. Now we need to instance points so, and for every point we're gonna instance a collection. So we have 3 collections, 1 stalagmites, 1 stones and 1 moss. We select, let's start with the stones, separate, pick instances, and now we can see that something is appearing. Actually, we want to control the density and the distribution. So if we increase the density, max, we need to crank it really up, so it's better to use a math node. So, and multiply, oops, sorry, wrong click. Let's make it 100. And this is the density max. And now we can control from here the value. Oh, we lost the mesh. So, okay, maybe it's way too much, but actually the size and the orientation of each object are identical, which makes that not very realistic. So let's use a random value to, we need a float is okay, and this way we can decide a range of sizes. So this is the first one, and Shift D, we make it another for the rotation. So they're gonna be rotated and scaled randomly. However, there are stones everywhere. So we want the stones only on the upper part and not where the temple lies. So let's go to layout and Control Tab and go to weight paint. Now we're gonna decide where the stones will be. So the red is going to be the areas with the stones, and the blue is gonna be empty. Okay, now let's go back to geometry nodes, and in order to assign this vertex group to the objects, we can just take the density factor and plug it here, and here we, instead of selecting a value, we select the vertex group, so group, and now you can see that the stones are only where we wanted them. We select the seed and put it here. This way, with the seed, I can just change the configuration with a click. Now I will do the same for the stalagmites and the moss using the exact same node. Before moving on, we can make some minor adjustments. For example, the stalagmites are not really touching the base. I mean, they look like separated. So go to geometry nodes, select the stalagmite node and add a transform node to move them down. We can also modify the design a little bit. Now we can, I guess we can move to texturing. All right, for the temple, I'm gonna use the same texture that I used for the pyramid. So if you want to recreate the same effect, you can check the first video. So I will just append it. However, for the roof, I'd like to change to a different material. So let's select the top. We can just go to orthographic view to speed it up. And now we assign the material to a new slot. So assign, and let's import a new texture for the roof. So shading, select the principled BSDF, Control Shift T, and just append it. Okay, better reduce the displacement value to 0.001 and enable the displacement. Setting, displacement and bump, and scale, let's make it 20. It's way too, I want it to be darker, so let's add a gamma node. Okay, something like that would work. For the ground, stalagmites and stones, I will use a texture from Polyhaven. Okay, time for the final touch, which is water, because this is a sunken temple. So it's going to be partially underwater. So let's add a cube. The level like that could work. Now we have to create a texture for the water, which is really easy. So we go to shading, new texture, let's call it water. So let's change the values of the principal BSDF a little. We increase the transmission, and that's it, but that's not the kind of water we want. So we add a transparent BSDF, change the color to a greenish turquoise watery like color, then search mix shader and mix them with a reasonable rate, so something like this could work. Okay, maybe the roughness should go down. Okay, that's pretty much the effect I want to get. And finally, we'll append a boat with some pirates approaching and a light. So Shift A, mesh, UV sphere. This is going to be an emission object. So let's create a new texture. Let's call it emission. And we'll use a greenish color for this light as well. The strength, let's make it around 13. Probably it's not visible because it's inside the geometry, so let's move it here and up. And now we have our light. And finally, let's append a boat with pirates. That's our boat. Now we can play with the parameters of the ground, deciding the number, amount, and size of stalagmites, stones, and moss. For example, I can change the seed, and the result will be different. So now it's time to create our final scene.